viewers, my name is Lucien Jeffrey. I am very happy to have you back. We are on Entrepreneur TV, broadcast by Rogers TV on Cable Channel 13. We are very happy to Rogers TV for supporting the entrepreneur nation and the business community since 2019. I would like to let you know that this show is sponsored by the Entrepreneur Nation, and the Entrepreneur Nation is a business community that we started here in London and are spread all over the country. So that sponsorship comes through the Entrepreneur Nation. Today, I have a great guest who is going to speak about topics that we've never spoken about on this TV for over 3 years. And my guest today is none other than Ryan Carson. And Ryan Carson is the owner of Carson Law in Burlington, who has been part of our network for a while. So when I open the screens, you'll be able to see Ryan with us here. Hello, Ryan. How are you doing?
Thanks, Lucy. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. We're excited to have you actually, and I know you are very busy. I must thank you for finding the time to see us today, and I must thank your assistant, the manager in your office, Stephanie, for organizing our schedules. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Ryan, I've been wanting to have you actually on this show since last year, just so you know how important the topics you're going to talk about are important to our viewers. So, but before we dive into anything, because you're a lawyer, we have to have a disclaimer that you're going to talk about several things and several topics, but what you're doing is you're not giving legal advice today. If anyone wants to speak to you directly so you can give them legal advice, they have to call your office, and the number that they have to call is 905-336-8940. So our viewers, if you feel that the topics Ryan is sharing today are very important and you want more clarification and you want more consultation, you have to call his office. So with that disclaimer out of the way, Ryan, I would like to request you to really tell our viewers briefly who you are and what did you do before you became a lawyer? We like, starting with the story because your story came from somewhere before you became the great lawyer that you are today.
Oh, well, thanks so much, Lucy. That's very kind words from you. Well, before I became a lawyer, I was at an undergrad program at Acadia University, which is on the east coast of Canada. It's in Nova Scotia. And I always had a deep passion and still do have a deep passion and love for sports. And so I was actually taking a kinesiology program, which is sort of study of human body, body movements, kinetics, biomechanics, that sort of thing. And so I just took that because I was passionate about sports. Didn't really know, at 19, what did I want to do for the rest of my life? But I wanted to study something that would be of interest to me. I've always been somebody who feels I will, excel and put more effort behind what I'm doing when I enjoy it, when I love it. And so that's the program I chose. And anyways, lo and behold, there was an opportunity to kind of double it up with a business like minor, basically. And so I did that in my last couple of years, my senior years of university, as well as kind of still doing the core kinesiology programming. And I realized I really enjoyed business, probably more so than I thought. And anyways, long story really short, I had a couple friends who were striving to become professional athletes in different sports. And so I thought, well, they'll need somebody to help represent them and take care of their best interests, not only while they're in sport, but, well after with their affairs, their financials, their estate planning and so forth. So I thought going into law school would be a great opportunity for me to learn more, to be able to do that for them. And I thought, hey, it'd be fantastic to be a sports agent. So that's why I went to law school. I was at Windsor, University of Windsor in Southern Ontario, and enjoyed my time there. And while I was going through law school, I ended up getting engaged and getting married. So it kind of became fairly important to quickly start making a career out of going to school. And so I was not able to become a sports agent, unfortunately. My friends didn't quite make it all the way to the top of their professional sport, or have a long career in that. And so, unfortunately for all of us, we didn't have that dream come true. But a new dream was sort of formed, and I was able to start practicing law. So I really, really have enjoyed it. It's been 16 years, which was mind-boggling to me. I just celebrated my 15th anniversary last year, and so it's been 16 years now, or I'm in my 16th year, and it's hard to imagine that I've spent the better part of almost 20 years, like now, practicing or learning about law. When you go back to University of Windsor, and then a year of articling and so forth. So, and that's me kind of on the work side of things. Like, how did I, where did I start? How did I get to here? But I'm also a husband and a father. Proud of both of those things. Those are outside of work, the most important things in my life is being a good husband and a father. I've got two children, a daughter and a son, and we just they're just the greatest things in the world. And my wife is very supportive, and she sacrificed her career so I could kind of focus on trying to start my business. Went from being an associate of about just under 7 years with a law firm, and then now for the last about just shy of 9 years or so, I've been operating Carson Law as the sole owner and principal lawyer of the business. So I wouldn't have been able to do that without the great support of my kids and my wife. So that's kind of where we are today.
Awesome, Ryan. That's great. Really, and that length of experience. And that's why we like knowing people, because before you became a lawyer, you were something else. And I really like that idea of moving from East Coast to Ontario, right? So it's such a journey. And I know another time we'll talk about that. So let me ask you then. So you worked for a law firm, but you decided to become your own lawyer, I mean, own your own firm. What prompted you to do that, to own your own farm? And how is Carson Law going right now?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of got to a crossroads, an intersection of my life where both professionally and personally, um, being an associate where I was, just it had run its course. I was looking for there to be a possibility and opportunity to be, a part owner or an owner of something. And yeah, I mean, you just got to an intersection where that particular law firm, had a course and a path that it wanted to see for itself, and we just were, diverging paths at that point. And so that naturally kind of forced my hand and led me to where I am today, which is, if I'm ever going to take this leap, ever going to take this jump and and be an owner, why not do it for myself, right? So I took the opportunity to take those steps forward and start Carson Law. It started just as me, pretty much me and an assistant, and we've quickly grown it to at our maximum point. We've had a total payroll of 25 people.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much, Ryan. That's great. So, you know what? There is one topic that I really wanted you to talk about and clear all the myth that we hear about there, Ryan, because you're very well qualified and experienced in this area. It's real estate investing. I've never talked with anyone about real estate investing on this show. And I know you are a real estate investor. You are a lawyer who helps real estate investors. So you know this quite deeply. Now, my question for you is, what are the pros and cons of real estate investing?
Well, I mean, the con is like any investment. You've got to make sure that you've done your due diligence. You know what risk level and risk tolerance you have. And so you're making sure you're in the right type of investment category. You're taking on the right type of risk as it relates to the investment, because the obvious con is if you don't do your due diligence correctly, or you're in a product area or a risk category that exceeds where you want to be from a risk standpoint, you run a greater chance of making a bad investment, and then thus potentially losing all or part of your money that went towards that investment. So like any investment, real estate investing is the con is obvious. Do your homework, do your due diligence, and you should have a minimized chance of losing part or all of your investment. The pros, one great thing about real estate, and you hear this and or read this from all the people who are very successful and very wealthy business persons or families around the world. Um, I think it's a famous quote that there's nobody out there who is financially well-to-do that doesn't have real estate in their investment portfolio. So real estate is a foundation or a cornerstone to any well-to-do or wealthy person's portfolio. Real estate has stood the test of time. It's consistently increasing in value. Does it have ups and downs? Absolutely. We're seeing that right now in the market in Ontario and across the country, where for the first time in many years, if you did a year-to-year comparison of real estate's value, it would be down in most areas. But it's a cycle, right? And the one thing that's always been proven true with real estate is the value and its worth has always been increasing. It's always been growing. And so I think that's the greatest pro of real estate is it's a very tangible asset. You can see it, you can touch it, and it just consistently grows as long as you give it time to do so.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Ryan. So I know you are a lawyer, but you put a disclaimer there. So you're not giving legal advice in the next question I'm going to ask you, but I have to ask you this question. So we hear all sorts of stories, sometimes on the American side, sometimes on Canadian side. What is the best way to raise capital to start real estate investing? I've heard that you can start sometimes with zero. You can use people's money to do it. So tell us, as a lawyer, and we know that this is not legal advice, people have to consult you.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty widely known. Like if you do any searches, on the internet, or you go to a couple networking or informational sessions about real estate investing, you're probably going to quickly hear like buzzwords like joint ventures, corporate structure, real estate funds through general partnership, limited partnership agreements. So those situations that I've just mentioned, a joint venture, corporate structure, a GPLP fund. These are kind of the most common and widely talked about and known ways of raising capital to be in real estate investing. The easiest one, and I think the one that most investors use, is the joint venture agreement, because it's probably the least expensive to get set up. It works really well for maybe the smaller projects. It could be still used for a big project, of course, but it's typically relied upon in the smaller projects where people are trying to minimize their legal costs because they're kind of maybe just getting this started, and they are wanting to make sure there's terms that are in writing between them and whoever they're joint venturing with, but they don't want to be seen as legal partners. And so becoming a legal partner with somebody creates a higher duty of care to one another. And so that's why people like joint ventures, is you can customize the joint venture agreement to make it say whatever you agree you are or aren't doing for one another, but not become legal partners, and thus subject to a higher scope of duty and care to one another. Conversely, you can enter into like a GPLP partnership fund, which is the other end of the spectrum, it's much more expensive and time consuming to set up, both usually with accounting, tax, and legal advice going into it. So most of the time, you don't see these GPLP partnership funds on the smaller one-off projects. You see them more on scale, whether it's to raise a lot of capital for much bigger projects like developments, builds, or we see a lot of people using the GPLP structure to acquire into bigger like apartment units, as opposed to JVs, which are more like duplex, triplex, one-off like burr and flips and so forth. So those are the two ends of the spectrum. And then kind of in the middle, you can use corporate structure where you basically have a shareholders agreement between all the shareholders of the corporation, which are the owners of the corporation, and the money's pooled into the corporation, and that corporation would be the one that would be owning the property. The corporation would be the one that is, getting the bank loan, et cetera, and so forth. But the corporation allows you to not only all have the money pooled into a vehicle, but it allows everybody to have registered ownership of the asset being the actual property itself. So corporate structure, you could use that in any small, medium, large acquisition and project. All three of those, joint venture, corporate, and GPLP fund, have pros and cons, but that's probably the context of a completely different telephone or TV conversation.
Awesome, great. We really are happy to learn from you, Ryan. And it seems like I said, people might have to actually consult you to go into details to know which is the best option for them. So
Yeah.
thank you so much. So then, Ryan, I'll jump into another question. I like having lawyers here because we get to learn more. So the government of Ontario, I think it's the federal government as well, has put a freeze on foreign investors buying properties, residential properties in Canada or in Ontario. You might have to clarify to us. But I understand there's a loophole. I don't know if that's a loophole. They want them to leave it. If someone is buying 3 units and up, that's real estate investing. They can do that. That is not restricted. So, are you finding people are actually taking advantage of that and buying 3 properties and up? Feel free to correct where I've gone wrong with that.
So I think it has to be more than 3 units, when I was reading the legislation this morning. But you're right, like a multi-residential property, or a mixed use of commercial and residential of more than 3 units, appears to be an exception to the foreign buyer ban, and thus a new Canadian who is not a citizen or permanent resident yet, or falling within one of the other exemptions as it relates to working or studying as a temporary resident, would be able to acquire real estate if you were buying that more than 3 unit building. So there is, it's not really a loophole. It's just a legislative exception that the government's allowed for, right? So I personally, because it's a relatively new announcement and law, like it only started January 1st of this year, 2023. So it's relatively new law. I haven't seen any new Canadians or incoming Canadians really take advantage of that exception under the legislation. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's not happening and other lawyers aren't seeing that on a much, higher scale. We just actually, to be honest, just haven't normally been a law firm that's worked with a lot of new Canadians. It might be because we're not centralized kind of in the hub of Ottawa or Mississauga or Toronto, which are where a lot of new Canadians like to settle. They're settling in more urbanized areas because it just makes more sense for them, it seems like. So we don't necessarily work with a lot of new Canadians from that standpoint, but I'm sure it's going to be something that many people start to try to focus on, because there's a great way of using that exception in multiple ways. One, you'd be getting the new Canadian a home, which is fantastic because they would obviously love to have home ownership arriving in Canada. But at the same time, you're almost allowing them to create a starting block to their real estate investment portfolio in Canada, because now they could live and reside in this multi-unit property, but also have rents paying or tenants paying for their mortgage and or providing them cash flow. So it's a very interesting opportunity for a qualifying new Canadian to take advantage of. Not shy away from it, but rather go aggressively at it and look into it, because it could be very good for them on two fronts.
Awesome. Great to know. So, Ryan, I had a question here, but I think we need to reserve it for Sarah then. Because real estate investing, it creates a situation of landlord and tenant relationships. And I know that is a very hot topic. So, I would rather we leave it for Sarah. So, I'll bring Sarah after you to talk to us about what happens between landlords and tenants. And I know there are so many issues that might take us 10 minutes there with Sarah. But let me jump and ask you about rent to own,
Yeah.
right? So we know that people can rent to own with final plan of owning the property.
Yes.
So is this going to be a loophole where the government is saying don't buy, but somebody can decide to rent it, right, with the plans of 3 years to own it? So they are not buying outright. Is that something that can happen now?
Well, it's again, because it's new law. This ban, this 2-year ban for buyers, foreign buyers. It's really unclear on how the bold statements of the legislation will be interpreted by the courts if there was, an action by the government against somebody who they perceive are in violation of the legislation. The particular piece that you're referring to about a rent to own being set up and in place, there is a section of the new legislation which talks about there is a ban, and the ban applies to even like corporate and trust and partnership documentation. So it doesn't specifically name a rent to own, but the question would be, would the courts interpret the structure of a rent to own to fall within that part of the legislation, and thus the rent to own would put you in violation or offside of that particular section of the legislation. So I think that it's too early to really tell, because I don't know of any case that has been brought against a rent to own scenario. But like I said, it's very new. It's only been 60 to 70 days of this new law, and so it's hard to see where the boundaries will be set as it relates to that particular subsection of the legislation. But a rent to own may be a option to circumvent this.
Exactly. And as you said, the courts might have to decide if somebody was renting with the plans to own and knowing very well that they are not supposed to be buying property in Canada. So we'll leave that to the judges. Thank you,
Yeah.
Ryan. So Ryan, we are coming to an end of this, but I really want our viewers to know that you are a lawyer who is extremely busy, but you decided to support entrepreneurship because you are an entrepreneur yourself, and you know how difficult it is to start a business. You know how difficult it is to find clients to build practice. So I reached out to you, and we have never met in person, Ryan. This is the first time we are spending time with you. I said, please, would you mind leading a chapter of the Entrepreneur Nation in Burlington? Because you are the only one I knew after meeting you through LinkedIn, and you accepted. I did thank you so much. So now, apart from owning your law firm and doing all that you are doing, you actually lead a chapter and group of the Entrepreneur Nation, other professionals in Burlington, and they have been saying great things about you. They have talked about your leadership skills. They have talked about your professionalism, and we appreciate you. I can't wait to meet you in person. So please tell us, how is that going? Why did you decide to take up the role despite being very busy? And how is it going with you supporting other business owners in Burlington?
Well, Lucy, you're very persistent, but at the end of the day, like anything, like I said earlier in my conversation with you on this show, I mean, like any investment, you need to do your own due diligence and do your homework. And looking into you and what you've built with Entrepreneur Nation and what it could provide and offer to me as a professional and as a business owner, it was an easy decision to take the leap to join. And why not accept the challenge of leading the Burlington chapter? It's been my pleasure to be a director of it. We've got a great group. We've got a great group of professionals. We're growing with your help and with the help of the membership. And I mean, I obviously believe in what the Entrepreneur Nation stands for and how it operates, because most of my other lawyers, 3 of the 4, are all in Entrepreneur Nation groups themselves. So we're really Sean's in London chapter. I believe Sarah's in a Milton one, and we're really proud of our connection to Entrepreneur Nation, and we look forward to seeing how our chapter, but the whole nation grows as a whole.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ryan. Of course, we are coming to Burlington very soon for the After 5 Business Mingle, and that's why we decided to do a big event. The entire region is converging there, and on that day, I plan to visit your office, to tour your office. I'll come early. So thank you so much. So again, thank you for allowing your lawyers also to be part of the Entrepreneur Nation, and I believe that this is going to continue to make sense for you and for them. So I want to ask you as we conclude our show, and thank you for your time. Do you have anything final words for our viewers? And it seems like we might have to bring you more often.
I'm happy to come on anytime and talk about any topics you'd like, Lucy. I just would like to leave the viewers with a quote that is in my office and one that I really live by, which is greatness can't be achieved by remaining in the comfort zone. And that's from Dwayne Johnson, The Rock. And I really enjoy that quote. I think it's a quote that many entrepreneurs at their nature believe in. If you stay in a comfortable spot, you're never going to be able to be challenged and grow. And I mean, who else to kind of look up to as an entrepreneur than somebody who literally went from $7 in their pocket to being almost a billionaire? So he's certainly done well for himself, but also he keeps things in check, which is he's a great family person as well. So yeah, keep balance in your life. Don't be comfortable. Strive for greatness. Don't be afraid to make failure.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ryan. We appreciate you for your time and we'll definitely invite you again. So, our viewers, we are coming to an end of this show and we thank you so much for watching.